Hello and welcome to the dashboard course by Trump Excel. I am Sumit Bansal, and in this video I will show you how to use interactive controls in Excel. Interactive controls are tools that you can use in your dashboard so that the user can interact with the dashboard. So for example, if I have a scroll bar or a spin button or checkbox, then the user can use these to change the data and the dashboard would update dynamically. So let's get started by first understanding how to use scroll bar and a spin button. Here I have census 2001 data for 28 states in India. I have the data for area in square kilometer and the population. And the intent here is to create a scroll bar so that the user has the flexibility to move through this data. I do not have to put this entire data set. I only put these 10 states and the user can scroll through this data by using a scroll bar. So to do this, first I need to ensure that I have the developer tab. As of now I have the developer tab in this, but if your Excel workbook does not show this tab, simply right click on any of these tabs, go to customize the ribbon. It will open the Excel options dialog box and make sure that the developer option is checked. If it's unchecked, please check it so that you would have the developer tab displayed in the ribbon. Now when you have it displayed, here you would have the controls group within which you have this option insert. Within insert you have two types of controls, form controls and ActiveX controls. Form controls are usually used on the worksheet and ActiveX controls are meant to be used in user forms using VBA. So in this video I will show you how to use form controls. What I'm looking for is a scroll bar which is here. So I would click on it and then you can see there is a plus sign. As I move my cursor you can see this sign. I can click anywhere in this worksheet and it would insert a scroll bar. I have the flexibility of resizing it and putting it anywhere. I can move this scroll bar, so I would move it to place it here so that it fits perfectly with the data, and when I use the scroll bar it will move the data here. So now I have this scroll bar ready, but it does not do anything as of now if I click on it. The reason being that I have to relate it to the data and I have to put a cell that is linked to the scroll bar. So to do that I would right click and I would go to format control. Each of these controls, these interactive controls, would have this option format control through which you can manage its properties. If I click on it, it will open the format control dialog box, and each of these controls would have different tabs here, but each of it would have a control tab here. So in the control tab, let me place it here, I would say that the current value would be 1, the minimum value would be 1, the maximum value here I would put it as 19, and I will show you the reason why I am doing it. Incremental change would be 1 and page change would be 5. Incremental change means that when I click on these tips it changes the value by 1, but if I click anywhere else on the scroll bar except those tips it would change by 5. And here is the most important thing, cell link. So I need to link a cell to the scroll bar. Let me link this cell, which is L2. And now if you want 3D shading you can keep it checked, else you can uncheck it. And when I click OK, you can see that there is a value here. Let me give a border to it. Now when I move this scroll bar you can see that the value in L2 changes. It changes from 1 to 19. And the reason I have picked up 19 as the value is because there are 28 states and at a time I show them 10 states. So when I come here to 19 I would want to show from 19 to 28. That is the reason I've picked 19, but it's completely dependent on your data set and how you want to show it. Now let's get started by populating the data here, and I would use this cell link to create a formula so that when I change the scroll bar the data also changes. So here I would use an index formula and I would select this entire data set. I would hit F4 to lock it, and in row number I would give this cell value. which is 1 here, because I want it to pick up the first row when its value is 1, but when its value becomes 2, I would want it to pick up the second row. And here I would keep the column number as 1. Now when I hit enter, it gives me Andhra Pradesh. But see what happens when I change the scroll bar. It gives me Arunachal Pradesh as the second option, and as I go down, it gives me the name of these states. Now when I bring it down, and let me make sure I have to also lock L2. So I would press F4 to do that, because I don't want this value to change when I go down. And I also need to make sure that when I go down, this value becomes 1. It gets incremented by 1, because if I do it this way with this formula, it will all show me the same number, the same value. So to do that, I would simply use a rows formula, and I would say G3 is to G3, and I would lock the first G3. So what happens is when it goes down, this rows function, this rows value would get incremented by 1. As of now it is 1, but I don't want it to be added for the first one, so I would subtract 1 from it, and this becomes my formula. And if I double click here, you can see that now it shows me the top 10 states here. But if I go down, it will change dynamically, and you can see it goes down till the last one. So this way I have created a scroll bar, and I have made sure that as I change my scroll bar, the values here would change. And now I can extend this formula to the right. I have 1 here instead of 1. Let me use columns formula, and I would simply say G3 is to G3, and I would lock the first G3, so that when I go to the right, it gets incremented by 1. So now when I go to the right, it gives me the right value, and I can simply double click on this and double click on this, and you can see that now when I change the scroll bar, it gives me all the relevant values till the end. You can format it the way it's shown here, but the idea is that it's picking up the right value, and it is working well with the scroll bar. So this is how you can use a scroll bar in Excel. A spin button is nothing but a simple scroll bar without this area. So for example, let me show you how a spin button would work in this case. I would again go to developer tab. In insert, I have the spin button option here. When I click on it and click anywhere on the worksheet, it inserts the spin button, and you can see it's nothing but the same scroll bar without this area. And it works the same way. I right click on it, I go to format control. Again, it has the same options. I would put the current value as 1, the minimum value as 1, maximum as 19, incremental change as 1. Page change does not apply to spin button because it does not have this area, so it would only have incremental change. And I can use the cell link as say M2, and 3D shading is completely up to you if you want it. Now when you change it, you can see that the value gets incremented when you press the upper button, and it gets lowered by 1 when you press the down button. So you, again, instead of using a scroll bar, you can also use a spin button. I prefer scroll bar because it has this option where a person can quickly drag this part so that the list would change instantly. But again, it's up to you and how you are creating the dashboard. So this is how you can use a scroll bar and a spin button. Now let me show you how to use a checkbox. Here I have 3 years data for 4 quarters. These could be net profit margin numbers or anything. This is a dummy data that I've created for the purpose of this demo. So I would first create a chart using this data. So I would go to insert, and within insert I would select a column chart, and it creates this chart for me using this data for 2013. I would change the axis labels, go to select data, horizontal category axis labels, and I would select Q1 to Q4 so that it now displays Q1 to Q4. Now I have this chart, and the intent is that I need to have a checkbox here so that I can have comparative data. As of now it's only 2013 data, but what if I want to compare it with the quarter in 2012 or 2011? So for that I want to give a checkbox here so that when I check that, say 2012 data would be displayed here. So to do that, I first need to create a checkbox and link it to a cell in the worksheet. So let me show you how to insert a checkbox. I would go to the developer tab, and here in insert I have the checkbox. When I click anywhere on the worksheet, it inserts a checkbox with a number based on how many checkboxes you already have inserted. You can change this. Here I would type 2011, and I can copy and paste it again and change this number to 12. You can also align these, move these, similar to objects as you use in Excel. Now when I click on it, it gets checked, but there has to happen something in the worksheet so that it will bring about some change. To do that, I would right click and go to format control, and here I would say I want, when someone opens this dash, I want it in an unchecked format, and the cell link here would be this cell, C7. And similarly for 2012, I want it unchecked, and the cell link here would be C8. Now see what happens when I click on 2011, it becomes true. So when this is checked, it returns true, and when this is not checked, it returns false. And now I would use this property to recreate the data and then feed it into the chart. So I would copy this data here, would remove these numbers, and here I would say if this value, I would say if this value is true, then give me this number, else give me a not available. And since not available are not plotted in the chart, it would mean that if this is false, this data point would not be shown in the chart. Let me lock this part, which is C7. So I would, let me press F4 to lock it, and now when I drag it to the right, it will give me these numbers because as of now it's true. But if I uncheck it, it gives me the NA error. Similarly, I can create a formula for this thing. I would say if this is true, and I would press F4 to lock it, give me this value, else give me NA. And now when I drag it, it gives me these values because this is checked. But if I uncheck it, it goes away and gives me an NA error. And here I would simply use this data because I want this to be displayed anyway. So now I have configured my data. Just a disclaimer at this point, in this video and the purpose of this demo, I have used the data analysis and presentation in the single tab, but I would recommend that if you're creating dashboards, always have 3 separate layers, one for data, one for analysis, and one for presentation. But for the purpose of this demo, let me do it this way. Now I would have to recreate the chart, so I would delete it and create a new chart. Here I would go to insert combo chart, and it uses this data. Along with it, I would also copy, let me check this, and I would also copy these, I would also copy these 2 data points. Now you can see that it has plotted them as column charts, column bar charts, but I would want to move it to the secondary axis because I would want a line instead of these bars, and maybe I don't even need to move it to a secondary axis. I can keep it on the same axis. So I would change the chart type, and I would keep the series 1 as clustered column chart, but change this to line chart and this to line chart as well, maybe with markers because it looks a bit better than that way. And it's okay, I don't want to put it on a secondary axis because they are all can all be compared to each other. Now see what happens. Let me place it so that it looks at least a bit better. Now see what happens when I uncheck 2011. All NA error come here because this is false now, and that data goes away from this chart. Similarly, if I uncheck 2012, it goes away. So it gives the user a flexibility to compare this data with, say, quarters in 2011 or quarters in 2012. So this is how you can use Checkbox to create an interactive control using charts, or you can either have data tables or use it in formulas. But the idea is that when you check this, there has to be a cell which would return true, and if it is unchecked, then that value would return, that cell value would be false, and then you can use that to create charts or tables or anything in your dashboard. Similar to checkbox, we also have the option button. And here I have some dummy data to show you how option button works. I have the revenue, I have net income margin, EBITDA margin, and return on asset. And the intent here is that if I have a chart which shows revenue numbers, I may want the flexibility to select whether I want to also show net income margin or EBITDA margin or return on asset. So to do that, I would first have to create those option buttons. First, let me insert those options button first. So I would go to developer, and here I would insert this button. So I would click anywhere. Say I click here. I don't know what this is. Let me delete it. And when I click on it, you can see that this is checked and then this is unchecked. When you click any other option button, this would get unchecked. So you can copy and paste this option button. I have 3 option buttons now, and you can see as I select the other one, the second one, the first one gets unchecked. And now I need to link these option buttons to a cell. So to do that, I would right click on this format control, and then I would select, say, maybe this cell as the button, and this would be linked to all these option buttons. So for example, if I click here, it gives me 2. If I click here, it gives me 1, which means that I would now know that 1 would refer to this button being checked, 2 would refer to this being checked, and 3 would refer to this being checked. Now let me simply name these. So I would say net income margin, and you can change the names, you can place it anywhere you want, just like an object. This would be EBITDA margin, and this one would be return on asset. Now I have this linked. I just need to create the data and link it to this cell so that my data would change whenever I change this option. To do that, let me copy this data, put it here, and here I would want to get the value of net income margin or EBITDA margin or return on asset. So let me first create the formula. I would use index formula. My array would be these because I want to fetch net income margin if the first one is selected, EBITDA margin if the second one is selected, and return on asset if the third one is selected. I would lock this, and I would give the row number as, say, rows, because all I want is 1 2 3 4. As I go down, I want the row number to get incremented by 1. But here is what I would do differently. Instead of giving any column number or hard coding it, I would use this cell link, and I would press F4 to lock it. And now see what happens when I click enter, and let me format it in percentage. So here I go to press Control 1 in format cells. I would format it with 1% decimal. It gives me 1.8, which is for return on asset. The reason being that ROA is selected. Let me double click, and all these numbers are here. What if I select EBITDA margin? It becomes 2, and now it fetches me the data for EBITDA margin. And when I click here, it fetches me the data for net income margin. You can also simply change this by again using index. I would select these 3, press F4, and I would simply say return the name or the row number. Since I only have one single column, I really do not need to worry about the row number and column number, because in this case, whatever it be, it would only consider it as the column number. So when I hit enter, it gives me net income margin. When I select this, it gives me EBITDA margin, and when I select this, it gives me return on asset. Let me give a border to it and maybe format it in the same way. So this becomes the analysis that is coming out using this data. I have these controls in place, and now if I insert a chart, say I insert a bar chart, you can see that I have the revenue, I have the return on asset. Maybe I don't want to put the return on asset on this axis, so I would want to convert it into a secondary axis. So here I would make it as a line, maybe this line, and put it on secondary axis. And now I can also play with the secondary axis. But the idea here is that now I have the flexibility to select what matrix I want to show. along with revenue. So if I'm looking at a presentation, a deck, it would be very helpful to instantly identify that the net margin numbers have changed in such a manner. 2013 maybe was a very good year, but 2014 and 15 has seen net income margin drop. And if I compare it with EBITDA margin has gone up in 2014. So there has been something wrong after this portion of income that we are doing wrong, so that our net income margin is going down. Similarly, if I look at return on asset, I can see that it was good in 2009, but then it has fell drastically. So this is how you can use an option button to create dynamic charts, and not only charts, you can create dynamic tables, the one which I've created here, because you can see that as soon as I change this, this table changes as well. So this is how you can use option button in Excel. Again, I have the same data and I'll show you how Combobox works. First, let me show you how a Combobox looks like. So I would go to developer. Within developer, in insert, I have the Combobox here. When I click on it and press anywhere else, it inserts this. If I drag it to the right, then you can see I have this Combobox. I don't know what this is. Again, let me delete it. A combo box is nothing but a drop down which can be placed anywhere in your worksheet. One difference between drop down and a combo box is that a drop down would be cell limited to a cell. So if you resize this cell or change this, the drop down would change as well in terms of look and feel. But a combo box sits above the cells, so you can treat it as an object. Now again, it has the format control option. Let me first create the options that I would feed into this combo box. So I would come here, I would go to paste special, and I would transpose and put these numbers here. So I have these net income margin, EBITDA margin, and return on assets here. I would right click on my combo box, go to format control, and similar to a drop down, I would have to first give an input range here. So the input range is these three, which would mean that my drop down would now display these three options, and the cell link would be, say, this one, D11. And in this case, I can specify my drop down can have how many lines. Since I only have three options, I would say 3 lines. And now when you click anywhere else and then click on it, you can see that these options now appear in the drop down. If I select any of these options, it would return the number of that selection in the list. In this case it is 1. If I select EBITDA margin, it's 2. If I select return on asset, it's 3. And it's exactly the same way the option button was working. If we go back to the option button, we saw that here if we change this, it changes because the number here changes, and the same case is with the combo box. Now I don't need to do anything. I would simply select this data, put it here, and show you the same thing I did with the option button. So I would simply use the revenue here, and in this case I would say index. This is my array F4. My row number would be rows, and I would lock the first P16 so that it gets incremented when I go down, and my column number would be this. And now when I press enter, and I need to lock this D11 as well, and now when I double click on it and apply to all the cells with a percentage formatting 1 decimal, it gives me the right result. I can also use index here to get the header, and now it works perfectly. Now as soon as I select, say, net income margin, it would change this data, and now it shows me all the data for net income margin, which you can see tallies from this data. Similarly, I can select anything I want. Let me format it a bit and now quickly create a chart out of it. I would insert a chart here, and I would also insert these numbers. Okay, let me go to format and add it, design and add it, select data. I would add another layer, and these would be the numbers, and edit the data from here. Same is the case with revenue. Now when I right click and say change chart type, change series chart type, I have these series here. I would say I want to put this on a secondary axis, and I want to convert it into a line chart. And as soon as I do this, it puts the return on asset values on a secondary axis and shows it here. Now as soon as I change this to net income margin, you can see that these values are changing and the chart gets updated dynamically. So again, this is another way of using Combobox. You can have many innovative ways of using these form controls: Combobox, option button, checkbox, scroll bar, spin button, and you can get as creative as you want. The idea is that it gives your user the flexibility to play with your dashboard and make it more dynamic. One last control that I want to show you, it's very similar to Combobox, is the list box, which is here. So let me show you here only. The list box is nothing but a box. Here there is a drop down. In the list box, everything would be visible. So if I go to form control and I say input range would be these three, and the cell link would be this one, and the selection type would be single, which means that you can select one single at a time. If you're using multi or extended, it would not work with form controls. You would have to go into VBA for that, but for the purpose of this demo I would only show you how single works. So as soon as I click OK, you can see that I have these three options here. If I click on the first one, it returns 1. If I click on the second one, it returns 2, and if I click on the third one, it returns 3. So it again works in the same way. You can change the cell link from this to this and this would still work. The idea being that these are different levels of controls. They are shown differently, they work differently, their look and feel is different, but the basic idea is the same. There would be one cell that would be linked to this control, and that cell would either return true or false if it's combo box or an option button, or it would return the relative position of the selection if it's combo box or if it's a list box. So this is how interactive controls works in Excel. I hope you found this video useful. Thank you and have a nice day.